Morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's edition of the MPC Markets Morning Call, 17th of June, 2026. I'm Mark Gardner. You can subscribe and get this directly on your podcast, platforms, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify. You can subscribe now and just search at MPC Markets or MPC Morning Call. Now, stocks slipped overnight as the Federal Reserve meeting is looming, and we had just had a little bit of that, buzz or I wouldn't say euphoria, but that follow-on optimism that we are actually getting towards an end of this US-Iran, crisis or whatever in the Strait of Hormuz, reopening back to normal. We did see a fair bit of heat come out of those chip stocks. I've got to say the price action at the top of the range here is starting to make it feel very much like an interim top, and we're having a look through some options prices, etc., particularly in that SOX index, or those stocks that are part of that chips, memory, etc. Sector that are on the left hand side there. The kind of premiums being paid out for, or what people are willing to pay for puts at the moment is at quite an extreme level overall. So that's usually a fairly good indication that the big boys are trying to offload some risk in terms of these names. So it's a pretty fierce rotation into sort of more real assets. For those of you who are on X.com, you can go back through. I posted something last night around price to sales, just on the back of SpaceX obviously being around about that, 120 price to sales now, if not more, maybe 140 odd. And essentially going back and it's a thread that goes back and says, well, if there's inflation and there's high price to sales, what's the general market move? And it pretty much sort of says this, really, a rotation back to real assets. So we had financials, real estate, etc. sort of rally last night. And the more growthy end of the market and the tech stocks, etc., was sold off. The last time this happened was around 2021, 22, and that was when we saw software stocks get absolutely hammered. And so, there are a few names in here that I would certainly put very high on the list, and maybe top 5 of things I want to buy. If the market has a significant dip, but that software sector in that period with those elevated price to sales, price to revenue, which we all thought was kind of dead, but here we are 2.5 years, 3 years later, or 3.5 years later, with exactly the same, market froth. Those things fell up anywhere up to 50% in the broader market. The Nasdaq fell 33%. So not to be overly alarmist, but you've certainly got cause for caution here, because these stocks on the left-hand side of the heat map have been either up or down 7 to 10% every day for quite some time. When you get those gyrations at the top of ranges after a massive bull run, it's usually a fair indication that the market's potentially going to have a bit of a breather and go back to reality. ASX ended up largely flat, but we had the RBA yesterday. Michelle Bullock didn't take rate hikes off the table. If inflation comes back, she's going to be, or they are going to be, pretty keen to be hiking rates again. But everyone's really taken it largely as a bit of a we're done now. We're on hold unless inflation comes back. Obviously, the government kind of helping, but not in the right way. The governments, and not just this one, but the last one, have been very off point with fiscal policy and making the central bank's job incredibly hard for the last few years. Maybe the last decade, and every time they try to get rates back to rates at normalized levels, there's continuing fiscal stimulus or over hiring within the government sector, or with consultants that the Labor Party particularly has done a fair bit of. And One Nation gaining a lot of momentum, very similar to the frustration shown in the US. It's not necessarily that they love Donald Trump. It's just they're very much frustrated with the incumbent parties and the two-party system, and kind of the only choice. But apologies to all the Trump fans out there. Don't send me any MAGA hate mail. Yeah, look, NASDAQ pulled back a little bit, but we're still, the most overnight, down 1.89%. It's still up 3% on a 5-day period. SpaceX. So we've done a good. I've done a little article on SpaceX. Been sort of inclusive of that. That when shares are released from escrow, so you can go to our website and have a look at our education section, and there's a full fact box there on 5 key dates over the next sort of 6 months, 6 to 12 months that are super important. As you can kind of see, we're not going to have that NASDAQ inclusion until just after the 4th of July long weekend. That is when many of the analysts, and there were, so many of them big banks, and there was a lot of them, so it's pretty much the whole market. They're all excluded from giving an analyst recommendation, a buy, a hold, a sell, an upgrade, an outperform, or whatever they do over there. It's all dependent on per broker, but they're really not going to give any, or they're not allowed to give any of those recommendations until that similar period. And then over that 4th of July long weekend, we've got a Starflight test 13. And look, after Blue Origin's massive explosion, you could see from half a continent away. That's obviously a pretty key thing. They have had a successful Starship test at this stage, so it's all expected to go well. But look, at up 49% since IPO, and we're sitting here at I think it went beyond Microsoft's market cap last night and is now larger than Amazon. Even a delay might cause some pretty violent moves in that stock. So I wouldn't imagine the instos and the amount of free float that's out there at the moment. There's not going to be any major pressure in selling pressure until there's that inclusion in the NASDAQ. S&P is not for quite a while, but and then the S&P ETFs are by far larger than the NASDAQ ETFs, although it's still not going to make any difference in the NASDAQ 100. So what it's going to probably do is, because it's replacing a much smaller stock, normally when they come into the index, it might be 10 bill makes it into the index or whatever, they're replacing a 10 to 9 bill company. Something coming in at 2.4 trillion and replacing a $10 billion company, it creates selling in the others in the index, and I don't think anyone's really taken that into account. And if we're at a vulnerable stage, that rebalance selling in the index could cause just broader weakness in the market rather than SpaceX weakness in the market. So look, there's a lot. This is super interesting. Nothing like this has happened remotely in history. So it'll be really interesting to watch, and it'll be a damn good case study leading into the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI. Speaking of OpenAI, I think they've got a net loss of around about 39 billion now. They spent 34 billion in 2025, 13 billion on revenue, net loss 39 billion ahead of their planned IPO. They're reportedly the next one off the rank, and then Anthropic around that trillion mark as well. It's been some interesting moves. There's been Mystic AI, which is an EU that hasn't been released yet. Actually, is supposedly significantly better than this new Fable 5 and this Mythos. So while the Americans run around and it's not available, Fable 5 at the moment, and Mythos has been restricted, but it's not allowed to go to any foreign nationals, which makes it, because they don't have customer data on people on their, where they're a citizen of, makes it very difficult. And even if you've got foreign nationals working at your company, they're not allowed to have access whereas American staff can. However, there's a Chinese model that's come out that's better than Mythos, and then there's this EU version that's better than Mythos. So, the rest of the world's very much catching up. So, I would say that OpenAI and Anthropic will be very keen to get themselves IPO'd. Personal opinion, but the Anthropic crew are far less greedy in terms of wanting to do it right and wanting AI than being a curator, I suppose, or of AI and making sure that it goes out ethically. We speak about these mega IPOs and bulls versus bears. We spoke about SpaceX on Friday. We're going to cover Anthropic and OpenAI because we just didn't have enough time. last week to cover it this week. So it'll be, mega IPOs part 2. And look, because it is going to be, it is going to have a massive effect on the market. But SpaceX did buy Cursor to improve their OpenAI, to improve their the Grok XAI, and it was a 60 billion price. So Elon Musk literally made 4 MIT 20-something-year-olds instant billionaires overnight. It's a big effort to be going and improving the coding part of their AI. That's where Anthropic got their lead as well. And from all reports, particularly from Kai here, who does a lot of, nearly all of our stuff with these models and has a coding background, he said Cursor is incredible, and that's a very good addition, I would imagine, for XAI within the SpaceX, within this, which is bundled up in the SpaceX brand. So they were joking that back in 2007, everyone was laughing when Facebook paid $1 billion for Instagram, and these days 60 billion just seems like a drop in the ocean. Gold and silver were fairly flat. Copper was down a little bit, but still up for the week. Platinum was up. These things recovering. They're very much a risk-on trade. Crude's below 80 for the first time since March. While they're, I think the market's probably getting a little bit ahead of itself, and I think we're around the 77 mark. Crude was at 71 before this thing. Reserves are like drained across the world. Strategic reserves for most countries, and the way that they actually store this energy is can be in large caverns. So they actually can't release too much more of it, and they have to bring it back up. Otherwise, these things collapse. So we've got a bit of a situation where we're already there, and demand was increasing as it was. And people have got to refill these reserves. So this demand's not going away for months and months and months. Not even the G7 leaders have had any indication as to what this MOU is. Trump's just drip-fed out the bits that he wants everyone to hear, as he does. He's pretty good in that regard, and he's going to, despite how bad the situation is and how badly the US have screwed this up, he's kind of managing his way out of it as best as possible. So the formal signing is on Friday, and then we've got central bank and Kevin Warsh's press conference for the first time tomorrow morning. We've got retail sales tonight as well. The SPI was down around about 20 points at around about 8,900. Flight Centre slashed its guidance, and then there's a few small corporate bits of noise, but nothing. I think it'll be a pretty quiet day relative, and we'll start to see things settle down just a little bit overall, I would imagine. But from my personal standpoint, I would be way too scared to be buying up here. And just on the basis of things being incredibly frothy, that options market where the put prices are through the roof, and it's just optimism piled on optimism, and we've just had a move in the US indices essentially that is saying, the Hormuz is reopened. We need to rally, but we were already 3 to 4% through that area. Like, you're looking at some of these oil companies now, and they've just enjoyed four months, and they'll probably enjoy another 4 months of premium prices. The likes of Chevron trading at back to where they were before Iran, the Iran situation happened. And Israel is just always that constant wild card. I think they managed to go 24 hours without firing at Lebanon, but that's like, it almost should be a national holiday. That's how much self-control that is for Israel. So I believe they did breach the original announcement of the MOU within about 7 hours. So we've got on demand now. You can go to nbcinvest.co/Sascension, or I changed that because it's not a word, mpc.co/SAS, or you can scan that QR code and you can get both of our webinars on demand now. Just sign up there, and then it's got the interactive map as well. And look, if you want to subscribe to any of our podcasts, either the weekly one that I do with the whole team, or the morning call one here today, and every other day, weekday, just go to mpcinvest.co/podcasts, and you can just click through, and then whatever platform you're on, you can subscribe from there to the morning call. Really helps us out and helps us get it out there. So really appreciate it if you guys can go there and have a look if you're enjoying it and watching it every day. But yeah, overall, have a great day, people, and we will speak again tomorrow.